Tim Kirby Russia, hot takes. A giant social experiment with real guns and live ammo was just conducted. What should we learn from this experiment in Kiev? So yeah, at the start of the special operation or war in Ukraine, or whatever you want to call it, the powers that be in Kiev just kind of rolled out a bunch of trucks and gave whoever wanted to take one, gave everybody assault rifles and ammos to, I guess, defend the city against some sort of Russian invasion that hasn't happened, and let's just say, yet, that's for sure. Now, what were the actual consequences of this, of just opening up trucks and giving everyone an assault rifle? Judging by liberal talking points, there should be mass murder everywhere, dead bodies. This should be the apocalypse. Well, the result was a 37% increase in gun-related crime, which does sound pretty bad, but you have to remember that Ukraine wasn't exactly like a gun paradise like the United States or Switzerland or somewhere, so it's a 37% increase of not a very big number. And that's it. So this social experiment in some ways kind of proves that the overwhelming majority of people who got excited and took these guns, well, we should say people, men, because if you look, it's mostly men who took these guns, the overwhelming majority of them wanted to take them to defend either the motherland or their families, maybe a little bit of both, who knows. And not surprisingly, for those who did take the guns and use them to engage in sort of like home invasions or apartment invasions, guess what? They definitely picked targets that did not have guns or some sort of means to defend themselves. So in a lot of ways, this bizarre experiment is probably one of the best arguments for the pro-gun side of things in America that I've heard of that no one is talking about for some reason. Generally, apparently, or at least with people who live in Kiev, you give them a gun, they want to use it responsibly. The overwhelming vast majority of them. Now, the second point to this is that a lot of times I hear these sort of like almost power fantasies coming from people who are kind of naive. They're like, yeah, I've got my gun, and when the government comes, I'm going to fight them to the very end, and it's going to be like this apocalyptic scenario. I think in a lot of ways in America, we have this sort of like, it's me against the world, one man against this evil society, survivalist kind of power fantasy that goes on. That's okay. Romanticism is cool. Romanticism is a part of life. I understand it, but it's not very realistic. I mean, how long is one guy going to stand against the government? Not very long. But one thing that did happen about people standing against the government is, again, in 2014, when Kiev sent its tanks to the Donbass, first the locals tried to meet the tanks with peaceful resistance, putting their hands up like, don't shoot us, don't hurt us. But guess what? Some of the tanks had regular Ukrainian soldiers on them, but a lot of them were filled with guys from the Nazi private battalions who took their women by force, killed a lot of people, killed the women after taking them by force, torture, at the very least, some sort of psychological torture of the masses. It has been a nightmare in the east of Ukraine over the last 8 years, and it is exactly that kind of scenario that all those survivalist guys are talking about. When the government comes for you, man, what are you going to do when the government comes for you? Well, the unarmed masses of eastern Ukraine, well, they got sort of turned into sheep by the Nazis. So it's another argument where, imagine, I wouldn't say that it would have completely changed things in the eastern Ukraine if every adult male owned some sort of rifle, but boy, it would be a lot harder to engage in some sort of Nazi-style Gestapo occupation of a territory. That's for darn sure, when there's a potential sniper in every window. So anyways, guys, the war in Ukraine and the social experiment done by the powers in Kiev are definitely cause for us to think and reevaluate possibly our view on guns, especially from an American perspective.